Hi, welcome to Daily Desk News Network YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Dateline Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. In the heart of West Africa's Sahel region, a nation is undertaking a radical and honestly pretty perilous experiment in self-determination. Under the leadership of 36-year-old Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso has forcefully rejected decades of perceived neocolonial influence, pivoted towards new strategic alliances, and embarked on an ambitious, militarized campaign to reclaim its territory from jihadist insurgencies. This transformation, born from successive coups and profound public disillusionment, is not merely a change of government, it is a fundamental reimagining of Burkina Faso's place in the world, watched with a mixture of hope, anxiety, and skepticism by global powers. To understand the rise of Ibrahim Traoré is to first understand the depth of the crisis that birthed his movement. Since 2015, Burkina Faso has been engulfed in a devastating security crisis. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have spread from neighboring Mali, unleashing a wave of violence that has killed thousands, displaced over 2 million people, nearly 10% of the population, and strangled the economy. The previous governments, seen as corrupt and inept, and their international partners, namely France and the United States, were perceived by a growing segment of the Burkinabe population as having failed spectacularly to stem the tide. This simmering frustration first boiled over in January 2022, when Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba ousted the democratically elected President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. Damiba too promised security. Yet 8 months later the situation had only deteriorated. Attacks intensified and the national discontent found a new, younger and more fiery champion, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. On September 30, 2022, Traoré, then just 34 years old, leveraged the ongoing anger within the military ranks to oust Damiba. His rhetoric was starkly different. He didn't just blame the previous administration, he indicted an entire system. He spoke of national sovereignty, the failure of foreign military assistance, and the need for Burkinabe to solve their own problems. This message resonated powerfully with a populace, particularly the youth, exhausted by foreign-prescribed solutions that honestly just yielded no results. The pillars of the Traoré transformation, well, Captain Traoré's project for Burkina Faso actually rests on 3 interconnected pillars: security, sovereignty, and social mobilization. The security imperative, let's talk about the VDP and a new military doctrine. Traoré's most immediate task was, and remains, securing the nation. He has aggressively pursued a strategy of, total and multi-sectoral struggle against insurgents. The cornerstone of this is the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, or VDP, a civilian auxiliary force. Tens of thousands of citizens have been recruited, trained in basic combat, and deployed to support the overstretched national army. The logic is clear: these volunteers know their local terrain and can provide crucial intelligence. This approach has yielded tangible, if contested, results. The government regularly announces major operations that have reclaimed territory, killed hundreds of militants, and allowed for the reopening of roads and the return of displaced persons to certain areas. However, the VDP model is also fraught with peril. Human rights organizations including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have documented atrocities committed by both jihadist and state-backed forces including VDP units, citing extrajudicial killings and mass graves, particularly against the Fulani or Pul ethnic group, who are often falsely stereotyped as sympathizers. Traoré's government acknowledges the challenge of human rights abuses, but frames its campaign as an existential war where conventional rules are a luxury it can ill afford. The message to international critics is often blunt. The primary human right is the right to life and security, which his government is fighting to provide. The most geopolitically significant aspect of Traoré's rule has been the wholesale realignment of Burkina Faso's foreign policy. In early 2023, his government demanded the withdrawal of some 400 French Special Forces troops stationed in the country and shortly thereafter, terminated a decades-old military accord that allowed France to operate on its soil. The French embassy itself was asked to leave. This move was not done in isolation. It reflects a broader Francophilic backlash sweeping the former French colonial sphere in the Sahel, seen vividly in Mali and Niger. For Traoré and his supporters, France was not an ally but a malevolent force, a patron that fostered dependency, plundered resources, and ultimately failed to provide security while maintaining its influence. The vacuum left by France was quickly filled. While Traoré's government insists it is diversifying its partnerships, the most visible new ally is the Russian Federation. This is not a formal state-to-state alliance like with the Wagner Group in Mali, but rather a deepening relationship. Russian military instructors have arrived along with shipments of Russian military equipment. The Burkinabe populace has embraced the symbolism, with Russian flags becoming a common sight at pro-government rallies. The West views this pivot with deep alarm, fearing the creation of a new Russian-backed axis in Africa that undermines democracy and human rights. For the average Burkinabe, however, Russia represents a powerful counterweight to former colonial masters, a nation that offers support without, they believe, the paternalistic conditions of the West. Beyond the battlefield and geopolitics, Traoré has launched a project of national rejuvenation. He has championed initiatives like a national fund for community development, funded by voluntary contributions and, controversially, a mandatory contribution from civil servants' salaries. He speaks incessantly of consuming local products to bolster the economy and achieve food sovereignty. His rhetoric is Pan-African and revolutionary, often drawing explicit parallels to Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's iconic Che Guevara of Africa, who ruled in the 1980s. Like Sankara, Traoré is young, wears a red beret, and speaks in the language of anti-imperialism and self-reliance. This conscious echoing of a national hero grants him immense symbolic capital and a powerful narrative. The challenges and the road ahead for the Traoré experiment are high risk, and its ultimate outcome is, well, uncertain. The security gains, while real, are fragile and incomplete. Large swaths of the countryside remain outside government control, and jihadist groups retain the capacity for devastating attacks on military outposts and civilian targets. Economically, the country is under immense strain. The conflict has devastated agriculture and trade, inflation is high, and the government's ability to fund its ambitious security and social programs is limited. The human rights allegations threaten international isolation and the loss of crucial aid from Western nations. Furthermore, the political transition remains opaque. While Traoré has promised a return to democratic elections by July 2024, that timeline has been repeatedly pushed back due to the security situation. The country is ruled by a transitional charter, and political parties are suspended. The concentration of power in a military junta, no matter how popular, always carries inherent risks for long-term stability. The transformation of Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré is a story of a nation in a desperate fight for its survival, choosing a path of defiant sovereignty over a failed status quo. It is a story that resonates across a continent increasingly assertive in rejecting external diktats. Whether Traoré's gamble will ultimately save Burkina Faso or lead it deeper into crisis is the defining question of this era. His supporters see a patriotic liberator, a Sankarist revolutionary breaking the chains of colonialism. His detractors see a military autocrat leading his country into the orbit of another foreign power, with grave consequences for human rights and democracy. What is undeniable is that Captain Traoré has irrevocably altered the trajectory of his nation. He has channeled the profound anger of the Burkinabe people into a project of nationalistic fervor, betting everything on the belief that security and dignity can only be achieved by and for Burkinabe themselves. The world watches, waits, and learns from this bold, dangerous, and unfolding chapter in the history of a nation determined to write its own destiny.